Hello, guys. I'm so glad to be here with you guys right now. This is a very exciting project for me, and I can't wait to share with you. So, first of all, I want to say thank you for being here, even though the situation is pretty intense. But I think being here together can help us kind of go through this together, right? And I know for me, training alone sometimes can be hard. And I like to hear from people and hear their stories. And that helps me kind of have new ideas and concept for training and going on with my practice. Also, I'll try to do interviews every week. So if ever you have a request of somebody you would like me to interview, just comment below and let me know who you would like to see next time. It could be anybody from any country, from any generations. Don't be shy, just comment below. I want to introduce you the first guest, which is a very special lady that's been around for the longest time. And she's done a lot of amazing work on whacking, a lot of research. She's also an amazing dancer and choreographer. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you our guest, Alyssa Chloe. How are you?
Good. Good. How are you?
Good, good, good. How's everything over there?
It's pretty intense, as you described, because we're actually one of the few countries. I'm in Sweden right now, and we're actually not on lockdown or in quarantine. It's an optional for us because the government, I think, is trying to protect the economy here. So some people are honoring the social distancing, some people are not. So it's quite scary, and we're all kind of nervous about how this will work out. But I guess in a few weeks we'll see. What's going on in Canada? How's Canada?
It's good. It's pretty good. Government is doing a good job. We're staying home, staying safe, and trying to work our way through it. But thanks for being here. It means a lot to me and all the people.
Thank you for having me. As the first guest, I'm honored.
Yay! So let's diving right in the subject. We're here to talk about whacking because we all love whacking. And I just want, for the first question, an overview of how the resurgence of whacking appear. So from LA to New York to now, it's all over the world. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And also about the first generation and how that first generation kind of influenced the fact that we're all kind of, I don't know, we're all confused about everything. So I'll just let you dive into that. And yeah.
I'm going to tell it from when I was first introduced to it, which was in 2003. And I want to make sure, just to make it clear, I'm going to be just completely factual about how it happened. I don't want to get to, it's not really for the sake of promoting people. It's just, this is how it unfolded for me in terms of my personal journey. But when I started, I moved to New York in 2003, and I was actually in 2003 I was dating a guy named Specs, who was friends with Brian Green. I actually met Brian Green at a studio called Faisal's in New York City, and at the moment I met him, he had just gotten the green light to start teaching whacking at Broadway Dance Center. At the time, he had already been teaching at another studio called Faisal's, the place that we met. He was already teaching whacking at that point and mixing it in with his house classes, just, as something extra. So there were quite a few people at that point, like international dancers, who were already taking classes and being introduced to the style through him. And also he choreographed the Maya video, which really brought a lot more attention to the dance as well. So in New York at that time, well, at least at that time, that was my first introduction to the name Punking and Whacking. And when I first saw him doing it, I thought it was really gay. That was my first impression of it. So I didn't really get into it right away. However, a few months later, because I met him like around June, July, about a few months later in October, he actually invited one of the pioneers of the style, Anna Sanchez, to come and participate as a judge, a locking judge. And at that time, she wasn't really so much into locking. She wanted to do more punking and whacking. So she did a blend of both, which was amazing. Amazing solo. I think it might still be online, actually. And that was really the beginning of me becoming more interested in the style. I think it was because being that she was a woman, she was in her 40s at that point, I think seeing that type of representation in street dance in general and seeing her expression of it, I think that's what really made me even more interested in the dance. And then I started in November of 2003. I don't know, this is a loaded question, Axelle. Yeah, so I think that was the beginning. It's such a loaded question because there was so many things that happened over that period. I think once he started, he was the main teacher at Broadway Dance Center, Ryan Green. And Anna was really one of the first pioneers to come from the West Coast that really started giving him the information in regards to the elements and in regards to the history and the originals, because prior to that, he did not know. He's originally from Queens, and his information was mostly from television, like Soul Train or what have you. So, he and Anna were definitely in alliance in terms of getting more of the information out there to the next generation, which included me and several other famous dancers you might know. I'm not going to name names, but you can look them up. But at that point, I think up until I would say 2006 in New York, Brian was really the only one teaching it. And Anna would be teaching workshops like around the world. So that's really up until between 2003 and 2006, it was those two really reintroducing the style to the public conscious, I would say, and to the newer generation. My journey is a little different than I would say my contemporaries, because very early on, I had the experience of I found the footage, the original footage from the Diana Ross footage of the originals, like around 2004. So once I found that footage and I saw what the dance was supposed to look like, my response was, okay, we're not doing the dance right. This is how the dance is supposed to be done. We're completely doing something else. So I think my awakening happened at that moment. So that really made me decide to follow in a different direction. I didn't really take much from Brian after that point. I started working more closely with Anna because she had opened her hand to me and said, she would teach me. And I just started doing more research in terms of finding a lot more shows and a lot more footage from that era that just kind of were in alignment with what I saw from the originals. So that happened pretty early on for me. And that's when I just kind of moved away from Brian, even though he was very popular. And I just started doing my own thing, which is where a lot of the research started.
So I just dug out the footage from the Diana Ross video that I thought I'd show people.
Yeah, I found this on eBay for $5. Yes. Okay, so we're not dancing like this in New York at all. So the first time I saw this footage, I gagged. Like, I gagged. It was like, what the hell was... And then I called my boyfriend in. I was like, you gotta see this. And he was like, whoa, we are not dancing like that. I'm like, nope, we got this all twisted.
Yeah, but that's also what's interesting. one of my next question was like, so how did New York kind of influence the dance? So what do you think, like, why do you think it went from there to how we dance now? What do you think happened?
I think really what the thing about New York is a lot of the information they were getting about the West Coast, they were getting through television. So it was a very limited understanding of what they were actually looking at. They just took bits and pieces of what they saw maybe on Soul Train or in videos, especially in the 80s. If you look at a lot of the 80s videos, they mix it with jazz. You see the influence of it. So I think they took a lot of that information and they just brought it to the club, you know? So it started mixing with a lot of the club styles in the underground. When I saw it, I saw it mostly done in the house scene, and people were mixing it with house and street jazz and Vogue, a little bit of club dancing. And so that's basically how people were just interpreting the style. It wasn't not that at all. Not at all. Even the way they take up space, even the way they took up space in New York in terms of the dance was very different. Very different. It was nothing like that explosion that you saw from the originals. That's what really was shocking about that video to me. I was like, whoa.
So do you think, so the movement changed because in New York they were getting it from videos and from the TV, and it kind of reinterpreted with their culture?
Yeah, I think, yeah. And, you know, like, for example, Brian, he came from the jazz world. He's a trained dancer. So he brought that, you know, he was using that influence because to him, you know, the interesting part about plunking and whacking and reflecting on it, now I get it. Everyone connects to something or relates to something different in the dance. A voguer would look at the posing and think it's Vogue. A jazz will look at it and think it's jazz, you know, because it just, you know, it has that sort of kind of universal appeal. So I think for someone like Ryan coming from a trained background, he related to the jazz aspect of it, and he thought it was jazz. So he would do more jazz with like whacking arms. Then you feel something like, for example, Archie, who is influenced by Vogue. So you saw sort of the influence of it, even though he wasn't deliberately mixing it. You know, I think he connected with that aspect of it. Same with Tyrone. I think once Tyrone came into New York and he saw Vogue, that did shift his style quite a bit. So I think it was just a number of factors. I think just being in New York and being part of the underground scene and being surrounded by all those different influences, that kind of contributed to how people in New York interpreted the dance.
And can you tell me a little bit about this video, about Breathe in Motion? And
I picked this video because this is what I saw, especially if you look at Archie and even Tyrone, even as like, this is from the 80s, but even when I met them, like in the clubs, they were still dancing like this. So this is sort of the New York expression of whacking at that time. And this is what I did see when I was in New York.
And people can find this video on YouTube. It's just Breathe in Motion. These are little clips, but so
yeah, this is a good to me, and this is my personal point of view. It's not like the law. I don't want you to think, but my personal observation, this is like New York style whacking. You know, if you look at footage of maybe Brian from like before 2008, same with Archie, New York style whacking to me, because it had that flavor of the New York energy, the vibe with the club vibe, you know, and it had the influences of, you know, Vogue. You see the influences of jazz, street jazz. So that was what I would say New York style whacking was.
And how did it go from New York and out to the rest of the world, like LA, New York, and now it's just everywhere?
A lot of international people, I would say, over that period, and it started to grow, especially after 2006, a lot of international people were coming to New York and coming to the conference and taking Brian's classes, and that's how a lot of them became exposed to this dance over that period. So it was just sort of perfect storm between Brian exposing it and Anna out there teaching, and then it was a lot of internationals who were getting their information about the dance clubs. It didn't really until like 2006, maybe after Willie Ninja passed away.
Mm-hmm.
That Archie became active in teaching this style in New York. And I think Tyrone was a little bit before Brian.
Okay.
Or a little bit before Archie rather, in teaching in New York. But at that point, Brian was the only one actively teaching.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I have one question from somebody watching is asking, is whacking considered street dance style, or is it strictly referred to a club dance only?
No, it's urban. It's street. Yeah, okay. It was not developed in the studio. Those originals that you see on that video, they were street kids making that up.
Mm-hmm.
Just like Don Campbell was, just like the Lockers, they were street kids too, making that up.
It's not like only a club dance. It's considered.
No. I mean, the thing is, and I think this is also a good question just for street dance. To me, this is my point of view, and Victor can come and clock me on this if he wants. From my perspective, if you were to take Don Campbell, you know Don Campbell, right? The originator, the creator of locking.
Yeah.
If you took Don Campbell and maybe multiplied them by 10, those are the originals for punking. Okay. To say that they're not street is also kind of dismissing or saying you can say the same by Don Campbell. Well, he was in the clubs doing all this, or he was doing it. His story is like he made it up he was at a college party or something. I don't know. But still, that observation is kind of like saying, well, if they were doing it in the club, it's just a club dance, then what were the Lockers doing? Mm-hmm. What was Don Campbell doing? Were they not dancing in clubs also?
Mm-hmm.
I don't really understand that, why that label has gone out. I don't know how, but that's my point of view. You can take that up with Victor. But I'm just like, listen, what were they supposed to be? Do you think they were outside by the garbage can doing these dances? Is that why it's called street dance? No, they were in the club doing the dances too. Just saying.
Good.
Don't judge me on that.
No, but that's what's great about this is that you did a lot of research and you link things together and help us understand kind of how the whacking evolved from what we saw in LA and people seeing it on TV, mixing it kind of with what they had. And that kind of comes to my next question, which is what do you think are the elements of whacking? Because I see often on your videos, whacking, posing, punking. So what do you mean about what are these different things that we call whacking? I don't know.
The whole dance, the original name of the full dance is punking. Just like, you have locking, you have vogue. The whole dance, the original name of it was punking. And it included everything.
Okay.
So once it, I think, became more commercial and other people started doing it more, performing it more, openly, that's when the name started changing. And that's when you have all the different spellings and so on and so forth. But the original name of it was punking. And I think there's enough documentation, interviews with people who can support that. Mm-hmm. Within the umbrella of punking, you have the acting, the behavior, the storytelling, which is really the essence of the dance, and the emotional aspect. That's really, it's the intention. It's really the vehicle. It's the engine that drives the car. Like without it, which is, I think, the difference between what we see now in the evolution versus what it was back then when we saw the Diana Ross footage. Mm-hmm. That is the intention. That is the engine that drives that car. It doesn't start with the arms. It started there with the expression, the story, the posing, all of that. Posing is just a frozen behavior.
Okay.
It's not like, you know, in Vogue where you're doing like photo shoot. It's just if you were to take a silent film and you were to freeze frame it, that would be a pose.
Hmm.
If you were to take a jump cut, or if you jump cut something and everything is just a series of striking poses, boom, boom, ba, 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 that would be like posing.
So
And
posing, sorry, so posing and whacking would be frozen images in action.
Yeah,
rather
frozen behavior, I would call it, because you're doing all the behavior and you just, you know, hit a pose and take a moment, boom, boom, ba, ba, and then you keep going.
Hmm.
That's a frozen behavior. That's posing. It's not a photo shoot.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing that people don't understand. In Vogue, it's more like you actually are creating these images like as if it was a photo shoot.
Hmm.
We're not doing that here. We don't have time for that. We don't have time. Everything is moving. It's like a silent film. We don't have time for a photo shoot. So you have the frozen behavior, like a screenshot. And then you have the whacking, which is more the arms, all this stuff, and the head, and the shoulders, and all that. So that's basically the sharp striking actions. And if you look up the word in the dictionary, it means to strike with force. So that's really all the expression. Yeah.
So it would be like punking is the behavior, the acting, the intention.
Not really, but that's the thing is it's not separate like that. You know what I mean? Punking is the name of the whole dance.
And then within that, there's different tools you use to kind of express yourself.
So yeah, it's the behavior and the storytelling and the expression and the emotional side of it. That's one component. Then you have the posing, which is coming from the behavior. And then you have the striking motions, which is the arms, you know, and the head, even the clothes, you know, whatever you do. That's all part of whacking.
I have another question from somebody watching. She's asking, what would you consider to be the first whacking battle, officially or non-officially?
2007, I was in it, and at the House Dance Conference, I sent you this clip just right before we started. That was the first one. I just digitalized all of it, by the way, and I'm going to share it through my lectures. But that was the first official one. Outside of LA, when it came to the resurgence, that was the first one. And there's a lot of people from all over the world who came and participated in that battle. Now, as far as like LA and that history with punking, they had their battles and Geno's and all that. And Victor, again, he has all the stories and the footage or the photographs from there. And he still has the trophy that he won. But as far as New York goes, that was the first.
So this is your footage of the House Dance Conference. What year was that?
2007.
2007. How many people were participating? I'm curious.
You would be surprised. It was a lot of people from Montreal, as a matter of fact. I think before they became part of IHOW, a lot of them entered this contest. I think including the guy I'm dancing against. I think he was from Montreal. I don't know, but he was Canadian.
I can recognize maybe that I'm not going to say unless I'm sure, but.
Then there was people from Sweden. I think Japan, of course. There were people from Philadelphia, people, of course, from New York. People who are now famous in the ballroom scene, the Vogue, actually, were all in this contest. It's a lot of people. You'd be surprised. Before they became legendary in ballroom, they were in this contest.
Wow. So a lot of people in 2007 as House Dance Conference. And that was the first time they officially put whacking in a battle. But earlier you talked about Geno's, that they had contests at Geno's. So what were the contests at Geno's? How was it? Like, I don't think
I have no idea because I wasn't at Geno's. You have to ask, or you have to talk to Victor about that, because Victor was the one who participated and he still has a trophy from it. And he has a picture from it as well. So as far as he tells a lot of great stories about how Michelangelo was as a DJ and the amount of pressure and work it took in order to earn the song, in order to be able to continue. So you have to talk to Victor about those details. But I'm not sure if it was the only reason why I say 2007 for whacking, because that's when it was an official whacking contest. Back then, I don't even think they were using that title of, they weren't labeling it a whacking contest.
Okay. Yeah.
That's why I made those separations.
Separations. I get it. And somebody's asking, I think you talked about a little bit, but maybe we can go deeper. Can you talk about definition of punking that we talked about and the evolution, the whacking and the whacking, meaning the two ways of writing whacking? It's a question from Carol Sensel.
This is really complicated, and I don't really. And a lot of the different spellings came about because of my generation. You have to understand, once the style started to get very well known, particularly in my generation, I think a lot of us, we started making separations in the dance for philosophical reasons. I know I did. A lot of people at that time, because they were quite young and they wanted to be seen and they wanted to be famous. A lot of them were just going out and becoming famous through the dance without really a huge amount of information to support what they were doing. So they were kind of leading a lot of people with a lot of misinformation because they wanted to be, listen, you're young, we're ambitious, we want to be stars, right? That was really the goal. They didn't care so much about whether the history was right or wrong. So you had certain people who were spelling it a certain way. I don't know where the spelling originated from, but there were certain people who were spelling things a certain way and performing the dance with that New York influence that we talk about, and who were very much in alignment with that sort of philosophy. They had a very specific philosophy, and it was just like, okay, cool. Then you had someone like myself who wanted to be separate from that, because I didn't really do that style. I didn't really want to be a part of that. So we had to start making these separations and divisions. I don't agree with it looking back. It really, really did a lot of damage to the community, because at the end of the day, we all represent this. But at that time, it was just such a divisive period, because it was so much stuff happening on Facebook. It was so many attacks. It was so much happening, that was being directed towards us. And I knew, because of my relationship to the older generation, I knew how it really affected them on a personal level. There's a lot of things you don't see on Facebook, but there was a lot of things that they were saying and writing and putting out publicly that really affected them on a deeper level. So that's what kept me a little grounded. And a lot of those separations happened because they wanted nothing to do with that. They're like, we don't even know what that is. We're over here doing this. Bad idea. It was obviously a bad idea, because, look at what's happened. Everyone is just like all over the place with like, what is this? And there's like, someone asked me a question last week about the difference. It was like whacking with a double A and a G, and it was just crazy. And at the end of the day, the dance, it comes from punking. They named their dance punking. That's the dance that we all do. Whether we do, it exactly identical, that's what we're doing.
So you would say that, like, the first generation had some kind of.
We made it very difficult, and I take responsibility in it because I played a role. We definitely made it difficult for people to access the information and to access the history. And it became almost like, this person says this person says that, it just became crazy. Whereas when I started, it was very simple. Those were the originals.
So, wow.
And I just followed according to who was in alignment with whatever that was. It was very simple. It wasn't all these people coming in and chiming in. You also have to understand, this is when it becomes a business. For the OGs, it was an opportunity for them to come back and teach and be famous again.
Mm.
Then you have the young generation who also wanted to be famous as well. So it's all happening at the same time. And we're still now, I mean, for the greater part of the 2010s, it just became dominance. Who can dominate? Who can take this territory? I'm going to take that territory. You know, whose message is going to dominate? So I can stay relevant and continue to make money. And a lot of the younger people got looped into that.
That's the sad part, is that our generation is now still fighting a fight that maybe is not ours, you know, when
it wasn't ours to fight, and we were just being manipulated. It was a chess game.
and
Because of allegiances to a lot of people and a lot of individuals, I think the allegiances actually made it difficult for people to actually receive the truth. It has nothing to do with the truth. It has, you know, if none of those factors played into it, people would have been more open to the truth.
And the truth, I think I find for me is like there's so many inspiration, and everybody can kind of connect with whatever they connect to, as long as the information is out there and the information is available for people to connect to it. And like you said, maybe a generation made it difficult for people to even access the information. But now we have YouTube, there's like interviews, like you say, with victors, with everybody. We could go and get the information and just take it in whatever you want.
You have more access to information than I did in 2003. And yet more people are confused. Why is that? How? Like, we didn't have YouTube when I started. So what happened? We happened. And it got very ugly and it got crazy. From the OGs down, it just got crazy.
So, wow. What should we do now? Get the information out there, huh?
Well, I mean, the information is out there. I think it's all about maintaining a sense of objectivity and detachment. If you are focused on the dance, you're there for the dance. You're not there for the people. You have to understand that mentors are important. You need the mentors in order to help give you your footing. It is very important, but they're not meant to be there forever, and they're not meant to be put on the pedestal. They're just, if you really want this dance, then you need to focus on the dance and do everything you need to focus. You know, if I had went with my allegiance to Brian, I would have never went the direction I went. You know, you have to focus on the dance, and on what you need and what you want from this. What do you want to? That's the number one fit. And then you need to find your own purpose. Find a deeper purpose in this dance. What is your purpose? What are you going to do? What are you going to contribute to this? If you focus on that, if you go from that place, it's not going to matter if this person says this is this. You can just take the information, you put it in your pocket, and you keep it moving. If you can apply it, great. If you can use the information, great. If you can't, that's fine too. It's in your pocket.
Yeah, you have it. Nice. Thanks for that. It clarifies a lot of things for me, and I think a lot for people too. But I have another question from Taylor. She's asking, given the context of and background of whacking, what are your thoughts on having it in a battle format that is typically used in b-boy battles and now used in almost all the form of street dance battles?
I don't agree with it, only because I feel like someone like Victor, who comes from the original, you know, who was original and comes from the original space, I think he should be the one who decides how it should be structured. I don't think the b-boy format, just like Ballroom and Vogue, they have their own structure in terms of how Vogue is presented and judged. I feel like, you know, the original should be the one to kind of come in and say, this is how it should be. And he has done it. Lorena, specifically, she has an event called Strike with Force, and which you've been a part of, you know this. So he is very influential when it comes to how she structures the event and certain ideas for themes and so on and so forth. Me personally, I'm an organizer as well. Me personally, I I would like to see a different format for this dance. I think there's so many layers and there's so many different ways that the dance can be presented that isn't really presented as properly through a b-boy situation or those structured battles. Even the battle that we did in New York, we it wasn't perfect. I mean, it was as perfect as for the time, but it wasn't perfect. I just think there's a better way, because in reality, the battle is not really meant to be between the people. It's meant to be between you and the music. And whoever gives the best expression or expresses their story the strongest, that's the person who wins. And the b-boy situation or structure, it becomes about you against the person.
Yeah, and so that battle against the music, what do you mean?
It means that you really should be focused on conquering whatever the DJ. The battle should be between you and the DJ. What was interesting about the battle in New York, for example, all the judges, before they said anything or before we started, the first rule was, it's not a battle. It's not a battle. We just want to see you come out and dance. No one honored that. Why? Because everyone was caught up in the Vogue mentality. The Vogue mentality is you battle each other and you try to shade each other. Even in my clip, that guy, who I was dancing against, he shaded me. He touched me. He tried to be shady. That's the Vogue mentality. In this dance, it's not there. Your battle with the music. I was conquering the music. That was the sound that, I was given. I was like, I'm gonna smash this. I didn't care about him. That's the danger to me, and what's been dangerous about those competitions, the b-boy competitions, because it forces people to focus on battling the person. You can't even get into the song. You can't even express your story. You can't even think about that, because you have to conquer the person. Now you have to watch the person. Now you have to figure out how to outmaneuver the person. And it shouldn't even be about the person. It's supposed to be about you.
Can you, I know maybe going back a little bit, but when you keep talking about your expression and your story and what you have to say, but maybe if you'd have some example when you've researched footage. I know you've found a lot of footage of people back in the days. What did you learn from that? What do you think was their inspiration or their influence? I don't know.
You mean in a competition or?
When they were dancing, what was their expression?
I see. This is, again, you have to. The thing is, I will say this, because it's really hard to know exactly what their references were or what they were trying to express, because unless you ask them, and unfortunately a lot of them are gone, so we can't ask them what they were thinking when they were doing this. But except for Victor, who's been offering a lot of context and breaking down specifically where a lot of their inspirations were coming from. He gave a great interview last week about that. It's really difficult, but I will say, when it comes to that older generation especially, the dance is very personal, meaning they experienced it. So for me, I think the best way of dealing and relating to them was to get to know them on a personal level, because it is such a personal expression for them. Even in the evolution, even when you look at the pioneers of the evolution, it's personal. So for me, getting to know them as people kind of gave the insight as to how they express themselves through the dance. It wasn't very technical. I mean, they taught and they could be very technical, but the truth is, watching them and getting to know them, if you knew their personalities, you understood why they did what they did. If you understood what they liked, if you understood what they were interested in, you understood why they moved the way they moved.
So everyone was kind of unique, and it's when they danced, you could kind of see what their personalities, like you said, what what they
Very
like?
individual. Very individual. They all had their own individual quirks and interests, and yeah,
So
all of them.
it's crazy. So if everybody had different kind of interests and influence, so what brought them together to
The dance.
do this dance?
The dance, probably the dance, and probably, well, it depends on who you're asking, I guess. This is like questions you should be asking them. I don't know what magnetized them to the dance. I mean, that's a really great story to get if you get a hold of any of them from that generation. I think that's a great question to ask because that's something that I don't think anyone has yet to ask, except this has answered it. But it would be interesting to hear other people's perspectives on that and what pulled them. Maybe it was, like I said earlier, the thing about punking and whacking is that there is a universal appeal. So maybe, for lockers, they related to, maybe they saw something in punking and whacking that related back to locking that made them interested. Maybe for voguers, they see the vogue element. For jazz dancers, they see more of the jazz element. And maybe that's what pulled them in. I don't know. But it's a good question. It's actually a really great question.
We'll ask them. So I wanted to know, where do you see whacking going for the next generation? Like, where do you see, and how can the next generation kind of keep evolving the dance and yet not lose the essence? Like, what do you think?
Oh, I don't. Well, I mean, it's really hard to see where they're going because every generation brings their own energy and their own influences to the table, I think, which is interesting. But I feel like the younger generation, the Gen Z generation, seems to be a bit more open, and they're really interested in learning more about punking. It feels like these last few years, particularly, there's been a shift, and people are getting more deeper into what is punking and what is this about, and going back to the history. Because I think people are ready, especially those who've been doing it for more than, I would say, 5 years. I think people are ready to go deeper. I think once you've mastered all the popular arm patterns, it's like, what's next? And I think people are now realizing, yeah, I think we need to learn more about this, or we need to go backwards a bit and connect with the essence. Because once you understand the essence, you'll never run out of things to do. I just did a solo. I just judged an event in Denmark. And Bleeding Hearts Club. Shout out to Diana and to the Bleeding Hearts Club, because that's a young scene that's coming up now. Anyway, I was just there, and she asked me to come out to do punking. She asked me to come and represent punking. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Like, I was like, wait a minute, you want me to represent punking, not the AA, or, because usually, I mean, I do get invited for those events, and that's fine, and I have no problem with that. But it's like, I know I have to edit myself, or I have to change something, or I can't really fully express myself because people want to see the AA stuff, right? So I went, and she's like, no, I want you to do punking. And it was just like, holy crap, finally. Finally, I can be myself, Wait, oh, you're showing? Okay, you're showing.
I'm showing the clip right there in the middle.
But I feel like that's, people are just, even though they may not be shifting per se, and I don't think, I'm not here to recruit people to start shifting. I'm just giving my point of view. But I think people are becoming more interested and curious in actually the history and having a more deeper connection with the dance. So I feel like that's where the younger generation is going. They're a lot more open. They're not so caught up in the craziness that our generation was. They don't want anything to do with it because they see the damages it caused. And I think now they're just like coming in with a more open heart. which
That's
is really good. It just seemed very genuine and just very like open. That's what I'm seeing. I don't know how they would develop. It's up to them.
Yeah,
I don't know how deep they want to go into the dance, but they seem very open.
yeah, that's kind of encouraging, because I feel the same as you say. Like, people are opening up; they want to know more about the information, and they are willing to not be part of that fight that is not theirs, and just find a deeper way to connect to the dance, keeping the knowledge they already had, and also keeping the influence they have on the dance, because it keeps
and not getting caught up in allegiances. I think that's the number one thing. As long as you don't get caught up in these allegiances with people and just focus on what you want from this, then they'll be fine. I have a lot of things from what I'm seeing already. It's a lot of good things happening. A lot of people I know, like in the 2010s, that kind of left whacking and they moved into ballroom and Vogue, and they're like, more now. They're just deeper into Vogue. I keep telling them, I'm like, you need to come back. It's getting good again. It's getting good again.
Nice. So I just to finish up, I have like 3 questions from people. If you have like quick little answers for them. So first one is right there. I just realized I can put them there. What do you have to say to the lockers that claim whacking came directly from locking?
Yeah, I think this is a good question for Victor, actually.
But what do you? She's asking you.
What do I have to say? Well, it's not true, but I will say that because they grew up in they grew up in LA. They come from the same backyard. So I wouldn't doubt that, maybe depending on which originals you talk to, they probably were influenced by some of what was happening with the locking. I don't know for sure. It's a better question for Victor. But one thing I can say is from my observation in New York, for example, like when you look at Vogue, you do see the influence of b-boying. You do see the influence of electro boogie, which is a style that people were doing, a popping style people were doing in New York. You see the influences of, or the signatures that make New York dance what it is. It's not coming from. No, New York, Vogue doesn't come from b-boying.
No.
But you see the influence of b-boying when they do a dip.
So it's like whacking doesn't come from locking, but there is influences from locking just because it might have been in the same backyard. That's the way you see it.
Yeah, like popping, the trifecta would be locking, punking, and popping. Those are the big 3 from LA, right? And then there's others, but those are the big 3 from that era. So I'm sure, being influenced and especially for the dancers, for the artists from the evolution, I'm sure they were definitely mixing all of those influences together, but they have their own separate identities. They have their own separate identities. They have their own separate rhythm. Locking rhythm is not the same as punking, whacking rhythm, even the ear. And I learned both dances. Totally different. Totally different.
I have another question, but I think we kind of covered that. So if you want to give a quick, let's say, summary, the question is here. Also, what would you say would be a huge difference in punking original and whacking all over the world from what you see, America, Europe, Asia, etc.? Just like if you had
the essence
points that are different, but let's say
I would say the go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I want to say like if you have examples or.
I don't have an example. I would just say the intention and the essence. If you look at, again, if the original foot, the intention and the essence and the mode and what drives the car is very different. I think once again the younger generation is learning from the outside in. They're learning it backwards. They're learning all the arms and they have all the perfect arms, but they're missing more the heart. That's a little, and it's not their fault because it is very difficult to learn. You have to really, that takes a lot of exploring within oneself in order to connect and be able to express that. But I think from what I'm seeing is people learned it backwards. They kind of took all the big moves first, but they didn't really understand the context of what any of that meant. So I think that is the biggest difference. It's having the context to know, what and knowing what those elements were that really made up the dance. I think for a large part of the 2010s, I saw people just doing arms and filling in the blanks with like breaking and all this other stuff that has no place in it. When in reality, it's like there are elements. So to me, it's like, for example, Vogue Femme. I don't know if you know this, but Vogue Femme, they have certain number of elements. I think 5 elements. Correct me if I'm wrong. But if for me, from my point of view, if someone came out and did maybe 2 elements, they did hands, and then they did a catwalk, and that was it. The dance is incomplete. It would be completely, it wouldn't be wrong, but it's incomplete. Right? So to me, when I see some people approach whacking, it's the same. You have the arms right, but it's incomplete. And then I don't know your story. I'm not connecting with you. I'm not understanding where this is going on a story level. I just see arms and I see you hitting a beat.
And
that's my view.
No, that's very clear.
But I'm also very careful, if, for example, if I have to go into a competition to judge, because I do have to judge the way those contests, I try not to judge it based on my style, because I don't think it's fair to the people entering that, they should be clocked, because they learn from a certain person and they learn a certain way of doing things. I don't think that's fair to them either, and I don't want to give them that disappointment in that sense. But if they talk to me personally, I would say, well, there's more.
Yeah.
There's much more to this, and there's a different motivation to this that you're kind of missing.
So for the people watching in the young generation, could you give them resources they could go if they're you really want to get the information? Where should they go? On YouTube? Should they go talk to people? If, let's say, their teacher or the people around them are not giving them information, what are the resources available for them right now to get that information?
For the last 10 years, Victor and I have been working very hard, collaborating as far as getting the information to be out there. I wrote the Wikipedia page, by the way, for punking. And that was something I wrote along with Victor. So that actually is a really good source to start if you want the information. Watching, of course, the thing is finding footage on the originals are very difficult to find. That's if you can find any, I have little clips here and there, and it's like gold. Because it's just so rare to find any glimpses of them, but it's so clear once you do see it. And unfortunately, it's just not on YouTube.
So
I share it. I share it in my lectures. And I used to have a video that I created called Whacking an American Classic that I removed off of YouTube for music reasons and copyright reasons. But I'm going to make a new one now that I have a little bit more footage to work with. I'm going to try to make a new one when I have the time, and hopefully we'll get that out as soon as I can. But it's really, and Victor, of course, everyone should have a connection to Victor. He's always posting. He's worse than I am. He is always posting some videos, some information, some insight. Everything he does is pretty much focused on relating that information and putting their story out there. So to really develop a connection, if you don't know Victor, you should.
Yeah, after this, you did an interview with him last week, so I'll link that so people can watch. I watched it. He goes through the whole history. So if you want to go deeper into the essence and the element, everything we've been talking about, he can go deeper.
Absolutely.
So here's another question from Marina. If you have a quick tip for her, she said, "I never coupled." She means that she never had a boyfriend with someone, so it's difficult for me to express about love. But disco songs lyrics are more about love.
Girl, you should not be dancing. Well, first of all, lyrics, and Victor wrote this down. Like a lot of the original punky music didn't have lyrics. Here, my battery is dying, so I'm gonna switch my angle. But a lot of the original music were instrumentals. Okay, so right then and there, you don't have to panic over lyrics. It's you're not there to express the lyrics. You're there to conquer sound. And sometimes, like my teacher she loves lyrics. If you talk to Anna, she loves dancing to lyrics. And my other teacher as well. But I like sound because it means that your story comes through the clearest. It's not influenced by a lyric. It is just your story. And it's you conquering that music. It's just like a movie in that way. Because sometimes, especially if you listen with a punking ear to music, sometimes I hear too much. And then you hear the singer. And then how she's singing, that's an emotion. And then what she's singing about, that's another emotion. It's too much. It's too much for me. I get overwhelmed. I'm like, give me a beat. This is how I'm feeling. This is where I'm going with this. This is my story. Let's go. I would say to her, simplify. Simplify. Do not become a victim to the music. She's a victim to the music, and that's not what this is about. Okay, you don't have to be stuck in dancing to disco or lyrics. You need to find the music that you relate to and helps you be able to express your story. Do not become a slave to that music.
Yeah, that's really good. So it's not about expressing the music lyrics, but it's about expressing yourself on the music and using it like they do in movies. It just becomes the soundtrack of your expression.
Exactly. Absolutely. Nice. Even if it's silence, even if she has to move in silence, and then maybe you put the music on top and it works. Sometimes, actually, a lot of the videos that I do on Instagram, because I can't add the music, on the stories, I do in silence. And then I find the music and that expresses it the best. Yeah, I do it all the time.
Nice. I have a really, really long question from Rachel. I'm going to try to read it. She says, in my learning journey of whacking, there was some mentions of the right and the wrong way of whacking. For example, people disagree to it being more of a boogie dance and saying yes to being in a performative and musical mode. Is there like a right and wrong way for dancing punking, or is it more expressing freely? That's it.
Wow, that's a deep question. I would say I don't believe in the right or the wrong way. Are we talking double A style whacking, or are we talking punking?
I think she's talking about, she said punking. Is there a right or wrong way of doing punking? Is it more boogie style or more a performative and musical mode?
It's I think every environment changes. Maybe the way you might perform it on the stage might be a bit different than how you do it in the club. I think that's really more the differences. I know that, like, for example, like, when you have to like perform or do a solo, that's very different. It's a different mindset, at least for me. I'm only speaking from my point of view. Versus if I'm in a club, I just do whatever. It's just another type of freedom. I can't really, I don't know about the boogie versus performance part. I just know that environments do sometimes change. Depending on the situation you're walking into, it might change the way you you perform it. But I don't really think it's the boogie versus perform. I don't look at it from those terms.
Yeah, it depends if you're on stage or if you're in a club. And
yeah, you know this. You perform on stage. It's the difference between when you're performing on stage versus when you're in a club and you cut loose and do whatever you want.
Yeah, I think what's difficult for people is when it comes time to battling and judging, is okay, am I judging or battling as if I'm in the club or as if I'm on stage?
That's a good question. That's a good point too. I always judge it based like on the club. I don't know. I don't judge it based on the stage because to me, stage is manipulated. Stage, you have lights, you have staging, sometimes you have set choreography. It's manipulated. It's structured. A club is not.
Okay, I'll take one last question. Siri, she asked a lot of questions. I'm gonna take she or he, I'm not sure. When we talk about the essence, we also say it's different for different people, right? So what exactly is the essence? And then it keeps going like, are you getting it from your personality, dressing, life? Like
all of the above. One thing I will say, that's a very deep question, but I will say that I think what was interesting about the originals is the different influences that they all pulled and contributed to the dance, and it came from so many different sources. It came from books, movies, experiences. You know, it's so many things. It wasn't from this one particular place. It was really an amalgamation of a lot of things. And that's what really made it so unique and very individual. I would say that for someone who is young in a dance, it's really smart to go outside of your genre. I think a lot of people in this generation, they look at other whackers, for example. And to me, I think it's a little incestuous when they don't really look within their life, their influences, like movies. There's inspiration all around. You know, art, you know, photography, experiences. My life shifted, like when I moved from America to Europe, complete shift, changed the way I dance forever. And just because I have a different experience of life. And that comes into play when I express my movement versus when I was 27 or whatever that clip was. You know, I mean, the point is you want to pull from everywhere. Don't just look at your neighbor who's doing all these cool wacky moves. Okay, you can admire them and respect that. But if you want to make this your own individual dance, you need to look at yourself.
I really like what you're saying. It's like the part that if we just keep watching other people doing whacking, it becomes kind of like a loop kind of thing. But if we go look at other influences or our lives, or just you moving from America to Europe, how it changed you, and you actually have to go inside yourself and use that for the dance.
We all have experienced adversity. We all know what pain feels like. Even though their pain was very specific and their experience was specific to them, understanding how they took and transformed it and created what they created, that's what you need to know. That's the information you need. You don't need to dance like them or anyone else. You need to understand what they were doing, and you need to be able to find it within yourself. We all have pain. We all have all of these experiences. We all have our stories. We all have our favorite quirks or favorite TV show, whatever. You can still use that. That's what's going to make an individual, and that's what's going to give you or make you a contributor to the art form for the future. Not trying to be like someone else. That's their thing. Now, when it comes to getting your footing, you're going to look like your teacher in the beginning, but at the end of the day, your story is your story. Anna may have given me my footing. She did. But trust me, our stories are different.
But that's kind of different. It's kind of where I want to close this is what is your story? I know it might be a big question, but what part of you fell in love with whacking, and why whacking is still part of your life? What is so special about it that makes your heart still be in it?
She was really the beginning was definitely Anna Sanchez, and watching her as a woman, of a certain age, mind you, not a girl. She was in her 40s, and she was expressing herself through this art form. That's initially what definitely made me interested. What kept me going, it's one of those things, like once you fall into that rabbit hole, you're not coming out. You just keep digging. But the more I started finding out about the originals, the more I started to meet people connected to that history, the more fascinating it became. Like, I have stories and I cannot share here, but just the stories about getting to know them and seeing how they would use it as a form of storytelling, how they would use it as a form of expression, and just watching how deeply connected they were. I think that inspired me to go even deeper for myself. And it just became, as soon as I thought I knew something, there was always something else. There was it's like a video game. Once you conquer that level, now you got this level. Now you got this level. Now you have, so I feel like I'm still stuck. I'm still digging and I'm still like researching them. It's like the more and more you just get closer and get into it, it's really hard to quit. Once you get that feeling, you don't want to ever lose that feeling. Even if you feel it once, you're always going to be craving for it. You always just keep craving just to go deeper. What else can I do? What else can I explore? Okay, how about this? Okay, I didn't know about that. It's always going to be something else to discover. It's just never ending. And as long as you continue to live and experience, you'll always have something to bring. Yeah. It would never get old.
Never.
I'm going to be 40 in June. So me at 20, something 23 when I started getting into it, and me now, different stories, never ending.
Yeah, you can always renew.
And then also, you know, this is me understanding it from a deeper context. If I just stuck with arms, it would have got old very quick. So I guess it depends on you. Some people, they get bored. Like, I get bored super easy, so I need to continue to dig. If that's what it was, I would have been like, I'm moving out. I'm good. I got that.
Yeah.
But obviously, you have to continue to find your purpose and always continue to find different ways to explore.
Yeah, it's cool because it can never end because we keep having experiences every year. I know even for me, the way I danced back in the days and now it has nothing to do. And I have accepted too that the way I'll dance later won't be the same. It's just
look at we're in the middle of a crisis. Imagine how this is going to affect the way you express yourself now.
I don't know, man. It's going to be crazy.
I'm sure, like, you know, imagine all the different stories that are going to come out, or the creativity that's going to come out. Like, now that we're kind of isolated and we're kind of in this rabbit hole, sort of, imagine how that's going to influence your creativity now.
It's going to be crazy, yeah. And it'll be, I guess, I mean, it's good time for us to go deeper, like you said. And yeah, I was very fascinated about the whole story about how it started in LA and then went to New York, now everywhere around the world, and how now the new generation is kind of like taking
embracing
it to look, embracing it, like just said, and taking it on them to look for information and find their own truth, find how they're gonna kind of write the next story and not get caught up in the old kind of yeah. And yeah, and you have a lot of information, and people can, I think, if I'm not wrong, can always reach out to you if they have more questions, right? And come to your lectures.
They can. You can come. You know, you can find me on Instagram or Facebook. And then we're also going to be doing something with the Eric Ninja, who did the interview last week. We're going to go even deeper with that conversation. I think later on in the year, if you join that group, I think it's FDWLA. FDWLA. Cool. And if you join that group, then, you know, hopefully you'll get the invite to join one of our lectures. I think it's going to be a cross-generational situation. And we go even deeper because that first conversation was just a very general conversation. There's more. And I mean, I'm in Scandinavia, so I do a lot of lectures here. And I teach as well. And, you know, I don't do online classes yet. I've been debating about it because, I mean, your class went really well. But it's just, I have to find a way to
do it your way, I think.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, it was a debate for me too. But yeah, thanks for having us. A lot of people are saying thank you for your advice. A lot of people are super happy that you answered their question. So I'll leave you on that. And
thank you for all your questions.
Yes, and be safe and stay safe out there. And
we'll be careful with
the internet.
And shout out to everyone in Italy because we were just in Italy together in that region that's most affected. So just, you know, sending a lot of love and healing over there.
Cool.
Or everywhere else that's affected.
All right, thank you, and I'll talk to you later.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
So thank you guys for being there. And like I said, write in the comments if ever you want me to interview other people. We can bounce back and forth like we just did, ask questions. I'll ask them to the people, and just to get information and inspiration to keep practicing, keep loving this dance, and stay safe. I love you all, and thanks for being part of this first experimentation. Bye. I love you.